Welcome to the Fighting on Film podcast, the podcast all about classic and obscure war movies, from the Normandy landings to the days of chivalry and swords. If it's been captured on film, we're going to try and cover it. I'm Robbie of RM Military History.
I'm Matthew Moss of Historical Firearms and the Armourer's Bench.
Hello, welcome back to Fighting on Film. Now, Mercenary Month 2 is behind us, and we are back to more military-themed films over the mercenary-themed ones. But we are entering an unofficial Aviation April, and we are joined by Martin Hemingway-Mosely and Zoe Lewin from A Memory Ode, a short film project that you may have seen doing the rounds on Twitter. If you keep up to date with the Fighting on Film Twitter, you definitely would have seen us repost one of their trailers, and we're really excited about this project. It really seems like something that we all could get behind and something we could all be proud of once it gets made. So, Martin and Zoe, welcome to the show.
Hi, Robbie. Hi, Matthew. Thank you for having us.
It's our pleasure. So, to start off with, maybe Martin, you want to tell us about your background in film and how you came to get this project going?
Oh, wow. How long have we got? You can probably tell by the accent, I'm from the West Midlands. I kind of took the plunge like a lot of folks do, have an aspiration to work in the film industry. And about a decade ago, did the big move down to London. And I actually transferred in a job in retail to kind of just get down there. But I was only down there a couple of months, and I found a delivery driving job for a camera rental firm available. And I just went for it. It was a huge pay cut to take the job and all that kind of stuff. But it was the foot in the door that I saw, well, if I'm ever going to do this is the way to get on the ladder. And I worked for the camera rental company that back then was called Procam. Now it's called Procam Take Two Films. And started off as a driver with, honestly, my knowledge was dreadful, absolutely awful. I loved movies. I loved the idea of becoming a director. I think that's how all of us start in this game. But I just wanted to just learn from the bottom, and getting in at a camera rental firm was, even now I look at it, as probably one of the best things I could have done. I didn't have an education in film. I didn't go to college or university or film school. I was literally learning from scratch, and the first kind of few months were actually quite embarrassing, because I was around a lot of people in the same position as me that actually knew their stuff. And when it came to cameras, people talk about shutters and gain and ISO and exposure. I was like, yeah, can someone fill me in on this? But I went out of my way to stay over after work, talk to the right people, pick up the cameras and teach myself. Well, not just teach myself, but learn from others that were further up the ladder. Try not to waffle on about that too much, but a decade later, or almost 10 years later, I progressed through as one of the technical workers to management, and then I actually went freelance in camera crew, where I worked on a variety of formats. So, trained and assisted on feature films for Netflix and Amazon and Sky. Worked on reality TV, which some people might turn their nose up at, but it was actually an amazing learning curve. The crews that shoot that stuff, they know what they're doing, and the pressures you're under to get it shot it's a great way of learning.
Yeah, I can imagine so. Yeah.
So the reality TV world, did live concert stuff. Being from the Midlands, I got an opportunity to do Black Sabbath's last ever show as an assistant. That was a great memory, great credit as well. Factual news broadcast. I've kind of been on every kind of set you can think of in the camera department. I've done a bit of operating, but mainly assisting. And while I was doing all of that, my aspiration to direct always stayed. It was always in my mind the almost unspoken priority. You don't go around as a camera crew telling everyone you want to be the director, unless you wouldn't get any work. So you pick your conversations with the right people. And through doing that, in my connections in camera rental and through working in crews, I managed to build up quite a good little connection base to pull people together for my own little projects, whether that
Mm.
was trying to do like a commercial business promo for someone or a music video. It was all kind of showreel building stuff.
Right.
And it was the perfect way to do it because, getting not only getting your hands on the top end kit that I'd learned to use through camera rental, but also be able to pull the crew together that actually work in the industry to kind of go, yeah, Martin, we'll give up a day or two to kind of help you on this project you got going. It really enabled me to start throwing together low budget projects with an attempt to give it high production value.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that ultimately was what led me to the beginnings of trying to start this film.
Yeah. Well, the obvious question is, what made you want to tell this story?
But this particular story, it actually developed from, I would say, caring enough about the subject to do some research. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is the initial catalyst for this film was quite a few years ago, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years ago. I found out about the museum, Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre, and as someone that grew up with a an interest and passion in aviation, I wouldn't say, it's a casual interest like many of us. I'm no expert, but I understand what people are talking about when you do listen to the experts. Um, and I found out about this museum, and my casual interest and my wish to shoot fantastic looking stuff. I found out about this Lancaster that was privately owned, and I kind of thought, wow, I'd love to shoot that in some way, shape, or form. I'd love to film a Lanc, you know. And I first went about just kind of wanting to shoot some kind of fancy promo idea for the museum, to kind of raise awareness. The thought being, well, if I didn't know about this place, how many other people don't know about this place? How cool would it
Hmm.
be to do a fancy promo that give to the museum, put it on their website, yada yada yada. And to do that, I actually needed to raise a bit of funding initially. This was years ago, and I I didn't quite manage to pull it together, and that was kind of a blessing in disguise because during the first lockdown, I really had to kind of think of what I was doing with this project I wanted to do, and it was actually my wife that turned around to me and said, "You need to think about what happens after you make this. You put all this time and effort into this promo. What happens? Where does it go? Who's it for? Right, it goes online. Okay, so realistically, after maybe 6 months, the majority of people that are going to have seen it will have seen it, and then it's just kind of there. Um, so, what else can you do with that idea?" And that's where my initial thought of maybe all along this should have been a narrative piece, something a bit more with some more thought into it than some fancy visuals. Sorry, I'm really going on a long route to
That's all right.
explain,
It's no problem.
um, explain how it came about. So yeah, that was the catalyst. And then when I got to the stage where I thought, right, this is going to be a short film. As a filmmaker, you kind of have two options. You either just focus on the fact that you're making some kind of war film, and you go, cool, war film, this is going to be great. People are going to love this. Everyone loves war films, action, yada, yada, yada. Or you've got the option of kind of sitting back, doing your research, and finding the real human stories that are in there. And without thinking of the big, fantastic visual that could be done with such a subject, you start approaching it from a human angle, and that is ultimately that decision to really treat the subject with some care and thought and respect is what led me to write this story. So yeah, that's the long
Yeah, because
version of it.
Yeah, because I think for people that are sort of getting to know the project as you go along, I think that does come through in your trailer and the marketing material you sent us. It does seem like you're going out of your way to show a human element of this story rather than being like, oh, I want to make sort of the kind of movie that you see in Morrison's for a fiver.
I think just to jump on that, I think you're right. And I actually was earlier today listening to your podcast on about All Quiet on the Western Front, which is a fantastic film. And you guys are talking about how it's a film that isn't just a war film for the sake of being a war film, but it's a film that has a purpose. And the way that you look at war and how you approach that on the screen, it's all got to be done in such a respectful way, because we don't have a story that's a true story in the sense that we're following genuine characters from the past, but they are all essentially genuine, and we are sort of depicting how a lot of people lost their lives, and it has to be treated with a lot of respect, because we know that this community, and it's a big community, but it's a tight-knit community, they're going to pick apart every sort of minute detail of this film, and rightly so. They're holding us all accountable, which is great, because it means that we're having to do our homework, to do all of our research. Every I is being dotted, every T is being crossed, and we're sort of going above and beyond, and that's all part of our marketing and our pitching when we're proposing this film. Is that we don't just have a story about Bomber Command, but we've really dug deep and we've really done our research on this.
It comes through as well with people that you've approached and shown your early scripts and your as I say, the marketing stuff, the PR releases and things. Like, they're not people that necessarily get asked about films like this. So it was nice, it was refreshing, at least to me and Matt, when we saw who you were contacting, who was dropping these little hints at this script they'd read. It was really sort of, I can't think of the word off the top of my head, sort of refreshing in a way, that you'd gone down that route rather than being like, look, here's our finished war movie that we've put no research or effort into. Yeah. We just want to make a quick buck.
It's so nice to hear you say that. And I know Martin will be grinning from ear to ear, because kudos to Martin as well, who's done a lot of this all on his own. I sort of joined him about a year ago, but Martin's found this huge community in terms of the people who are historical consultants, and they're experts in film and TV, and they live and breathe, they love this time period. And so our 5 out of our 7 bomber crew are made up of reenactors who own their own period correct uniform. And they've done this countless times. They go around tours of the UK, they do talks, they do reenactments, they also have film and TV experience. And Martin's pulled this all together. We'll talk in a little bit about the special effects studio that we're working with. But Martin, just off his own back, has put together this huge team of experts who are all just so willing to help us out and get this film made as well. It's really lovely to see.
No, I agree.
When did you start work on the actual project itself, Martin? I know it was pre-COVID, but was it further back than that, or how long have you been working on this so far?
Well, if we're talking from the very, very beginning, like I say, I think that was 5 years ago, maybe a little longer. But from the narrative angle, that's been from first lockdown, COVID, and we're on. I'm currently tweaking the 18th draft of the script now, and that is because of the advice we're getting predominantly, and it's fascinating to see how much someone can find a small detail to do with this subject in a script and correct you on it. And it just comes from different people's experiences and what their knowledge. And some people are kind of more specialist and knowledgeable in certain areas than others. Some people have got a general great overview, but not a specific detail. So that's how it's come about. I have to give a shout out to a chap called Martin Keane from the museum. He's been helping me for quite a few years. He's a photographer and one of the volunteers at the museum. And it all came about. I asked him, if I could use some of his photographs as like promotional material. He said yes, fine, no problem. And then I just started asking questions about some of the detail. He was one of the first people I spoke to. And if you were to read one of the first iterations of the script, the amount it got corrected after the first one, just from my ramblings as a filmmaker trying to make something that looks cool, but then to give it to someone and go, right, tell me everything that's wrong with this. And it was basically, everything is wrong with this. I will help you. And
Well,
you know,
that's commendable of a filmmaker to do that anyway, because obviously, you know, it's an artistic medium and people can be very protective of over their babies, and they, you know, they aren't always going to be open to criticism. So it's nice to hear a filmmaker talk honestly and groundedly about taking criticism and really iterating a script to, you know, until it's exactly where you want it to be.
It's a unique feeling having your darlings killed. I've been there myself. So to take it on board and be able to run with it and accept that it's not a criticism of your writing, but it's maybe just a criticism of your, you know, you don't know the subject matter going into it as much as you'd like, but you're still trying to make something that is going to be respectful and authentic. So that is, you know, very commendable. But in terms of a question I had, in terms of influences of other films, you know, what kind of are you taking inspiration from any of the classic era 50s war movies like, you know, Dam Busters, Appointment in London? Is there anything like that you've drawn in?
Hello there, sorry to interrupt. I wanted to let you know that you can now join our supporting cast over on Patreon. As thanks for your support, you'll be able to help us pick films, submit questions for guests, have first pick on brand new and exclusive merch, and much more. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Obviously, you can't approach a film on this subject without considering the Dam Busters, but in terms of influence, I'd definitely say Appointment in London is up there. You know, I think that film is quite forward thinking for its time in how it looks at the human experience, the mental strain and pressure that, you know, living in that world must have had on those young guys, where 8 hours of complete hell and threat of being killed, then back at home baking and eggs, down to the pub with your mates, chatting to girls, and then back out 8 hours of complete hell again. You know, we can't even comprehend what that must have felt like. But what we're trying to do with our film is just show a small snippet of what it may have been like for someone new and young joining an experienced crew, and the knock-on confidence that may have had, but also in the wider aspect, and without giving too much away, is how war, you know, the war in general has had far-reaching effects on people up until even now, and that's kind of where the past and present day crossover works in our film. And I'm not going to say too much more on that. But, you know, looking at my wider influences, I grew up, I was fortunate to have a granddad that he was infantry. And I was fortunate that he used to tell me stories about his experience in the war, which, you know, at the same time would be at theirs on a Saturday afternoon, watching the Dam Busters, Bridge over the River Kwai, The Great Escape. I'll be hearing his stories about being attacked by stupid dive bombers down a railway line, for example, and that blended in my mind with what I was seeing in these movies. So he kind of became an action film star to me. Whether he intended to do that or not, I don't know. Maybe he did. But you know, I was very fortunate to have that, and that was definitely an influence early on my love for cinema and film and war movies especially. But equally, around the same time, my earliest memory of actually questioning how a film was made was watching Jurassic Park, and my grandparents had it on VHS. And I remember I was aware that it wasn't real, but the fact that there was these dinosaurs that looked completely photorealistic absolutely fascinated me. And that was that was my first memory of wondering how these movies were made. And that kind of kick-started it all. And obviously my love for Spielberg has continued. I'm not afraid to say it. Some filmmakers, I think, can be a bit snobbish and they don't like to mention, oh, it's too obvious. But no, Spielberg is one of the greats, always will be. But you know, as you grow up, you discover new filmmakers, and you know, you've got Kubrick, more recently Christopher Nolan, Denis Villeneuve, Alfonso Cuarón, like Children of Men. He's, you know, superb, one of my favourite films. But you know, I'm not afraid to admit that one of my favourite filmmakers is James Cameron. I don't think he gets enough respect from the kind of cinema community. I suppose in some ways he's too much from the world of blockbuster land. But when you look at his movies and the spectacle and the entertainment value that he puts into his films and the boundary pushing technology with visual effects, but all of his films have always had this very deep, like this very grounded human story, and it's always relatable. Whether it's Sarah and John Connor in The Terminator and Terminator 2, or you know Ripley and Newt in Aliens, and or even True Lies with Arnie and Jamie Lee Curtis, their characters. You know, they're all of his films have this great entertaining spectacle, but the stories are very grounded. And there is a lot of influence in that for me. They're the kind of films I want to make, and that's a big reason why I'm so glad we've been able to team up with the in-camera guys to do the visual effects for our film, because you know what they're doing with the model I built and the old school techniques with the new technology that they're doing to create the scenes for us for our film, you know, are already looking amazing, and I can't wait what else we're going to do with that and see what else they come up with. But you know, so you got that element there, but I'll also say, you know, someone like Shane Meadows, you know, this film is nowhere near as dark as one of his films, but you see how he shoots things like This Is England or Dead Man's Shoes. There's a combination of handheld, a lot of mid and tight shots. There's you know, handheld and locked off on grip, to create a really involved and I suppose a very personal connection with the characters. And so I like to think that, you know, a big in an odd way, you know, imagine a James Cameron movie crossed with a Shane Meadows movie. He's kind of somewhere where my other influences are with this film. And then there's actually a TV series that I love called This Is Us. It's just about a family and it's about life and it's beautifully written. But the musical score for that series by a guy called Siddhartha Khosla it's exceptional. It honestly, nearly every episode makes you cry. And when you think about it, most of the time it's down to the music that accompanies the great storytelling. So it's almost my inspiration, you know, other than the obvious where it's more like Appointment in London. If you imagine a James Cameron movie crossed with a Shane Meadows movie with the music of Siddhartha Khosla in there to give it that emotion, it's somewhere around that. And yeah, I think that's the best way of describing it.
Yeah, like more character narrative driven piece than a epic. Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, because his stuff is filmed in a certain way. There's no bells and whistles. It's people at its core, isn't it?
Precisely.
Yeah. So in terms of visual effects, I mean, I know that is something that people have been excited about, because I know the company you're working with are really revered for what they do. So maybe just explain to the listeners who maybe don't know, because it's quite exciting really what they can pull off in camera. That's what I really like about what they can do.
They are incredible, those guys. We are so fortunate to have them invested in our projects. And that is because both of the Tommy and James who present the show and do all the effects. So sorry to explain, they're a YouTube channel called In Camera Effects.
Yep.
And they essentially do tutorials on how anyone at home with stuff you can buy off the shelf can create Hollywood VFX, but specifically in camera. So they try and do as much as they can in camera, hence the name In Camera Effects, with scale models and props, but blended with the kind of software that everyone can use from home, to get as close to you can to the stuff that comes out of Hollywood. You know, they've recreated a scene from Star Wars, for example, with the trench run. They did a wet for dry shoot with a submarine, and it looks incredible. And for us, I built a off-the-shelf 132 scale Lancaster, the HK Model 1, and modified it.
Yep.
With motorized engines and mid-upper turret, and a mount at the back, knowing it needed to be attached to motion control. We built that and modified it ourselves, and then gave it to the in-camera guys who have put that to work and built their own custom-built motion control rig for both the model and camera to do the dynamic shots film.
It really is something. It really is something what they can do. And you can go on their YouTube channel, listeners, and find their effects reels of the Lancaster sequences they're doing. And it really,
Very
and
cool.
I think this is where, for me, this sort of like the 50s element comes in, where that was all model work and stock footage. So you've got this really nice marriage of modern filmmaking, but still using those old techniques that echo the past.
You're precise. You're exactly right, and it is literally that marriage between. I think what happens in the film world with technology, we come that obsessed with the new advances. It takes someone. It's like what's happened with virtual production recently, which is essentially a new version of rear and front projection. Now, rear and front projection, they've stopped using it essentially when blue screen and grey screen came about.
Yeah.
And then someone's kind of gone, hang on a minute, LED technology is pretty good now. Why don't we start trying to do that, but with high resolution footage on a digital screen? That's just an example. And so what the in-camera guys do is they look at old techniques and they go, oh, what can we buy off the shelf that we can do that now with? And it's surely going to look 10 times better. So yeah, they've actually, for our episode, they talk about going further than the expensive cost of virtual production. And they actually talk about doing a new version of rear projection with some new material, which they've got their hands on. And it looks incredible. But they even explained that this is a cheap way of doing what these virtual production stages are doing, with similar results in some instances, if not better. So it just shows you what those guys are researching and putting their effort into for the world to see through their YouTube channel. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I would recommend. We'll share some of their stuff when this episode goes live. But I would recommend to the FOF faithful that you go and check out what those guys are doing, because it's quite something.
Yeah, it's very cool to see how it's actually done. With it's such a small model, but then you look at some of the stuff that you shared with us, and it looks great.
Yeah,
you'd be hard pressed to know it was.
Yeah, you couldn't do better with CGI. I mean, it really it's just ridiculous. It's amazing.
It's funny how for early conversations, when they kind of got involved, they approached me. I did a Facebook post, and I had this idea for an opening shot, and I put up a screen grab from the film Sunshine, and I was actually trying to find a CG artist because I didn't even for 1 minute think anything about practical effects was doable.
Yeah.
So I was trying to look for a CG artist that might do me a favor, and it was James sent me a message saying, kind of like, dude, I love your examples. You seem to have a real vision for what you want. We may be able to help. And we went from there, and obviously they learned more about the project, told us about their connection with Bomber Command and the Lancasters. and their family connection. So from that point forward, it was a case of, okay, how are we going to do this? And we whittled it down to, we're going to have to buy a model off the shelf. They were like, we do know a guy that does these amazing custom builds that could do like a 1/5 scale. And we're like, yeah, but realistically, we're not going to afford that.
Yeah, cost.
So we talked about the 1/32 scale, and we were both like, it might be a little small. And then look what they've come out with recently. It kind of proves, actually, you can.
Yeah, they shared some more a couple of days ago, didn't they? And it's got a lot of the a little bit more produced, so it shows them. There's a really spectacular bit where they I think use like an aerosol to fire some like flame over the body of the aircraft, and it looks immense. From reading the script that you shared with us, I mean, obviously that first opening 5 minutes is quite it's action packed. It's not to give anything away to anyone, but it's to board the bomber. So we've talked about you coupling that practical effects skill. Are you going to be building sets? Where are you hoping to film this? Because obviously you need to get those internal shots right to immerse the viewer. So what do you have in mind for that aspect of the production?
Well, one of the great things that kind of links what I'm doing now to my original idea of making a promo museum is, not other than the VFX, the entirety of the rest of this film is going to be shot at the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre. So it still brings us back to the museum that I was intending to film at all along. And part of that is filming on board their Lancaster Just Jane, which, being privately owned, it's unlike the other one that flies, which is owned by the RAF, so you could not get near that. That is still a registered bomber. Technically, it could go to war, but the one at the Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre that they're restoring to airworthiness, I've built up a relationship with those guys through Martin Keane and Andrew Panton from the museum. His family started the museum, and the Lancaster they own, we're essentially going to shoot on there, and this is part of the next funding stage where we're at. Is essentially we're trying to raise the funds to get back to the museum, do a night shoot inside their hangar with the Lancaster, so there's minimal light spill from anywhere, and do those interiors to match the VFX shots for the opening scene. That's so great. We'll be filming inside an actual Lancaster.
Yeah, I might say another feather to your bow. So you were talking about the getting the money together there, and we couldn't do an episode with you guys without telling the listeners how they can help with this project, because I know you're currently raising the funds. Would you like to tell everyone how they can help you?
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, guys. So if you go to our website, which is amemoryodefilm.com, you can get through to our fundraiser there. If you Google A Memory Ode Film, if you go onto any of the social media pages, anything to do with A Memory Ode Film, you'll get yourself to our GoFundMe page, which is where you can donate and find out more about the subject and see our teaser.
Yeah, it's worth just going there to watch the teaser alone, and then if you can help, guys, it would be great. Yeah, and I think you're trying to raise, is it £14,000?
Yes, for the next stage of filming.
That's it.
And yeah, that's correct.
Cool. And we're going to chuck 50 quid in. So,
Oh, thanks so much.
No problem.
Appreciate that.
We'll get that in the next.
Guys, that's so nice.
Well,
that's no problem. We'll get that in the next.
We'd be hypocrites if we didn't support British filmmaking, wouldn't we? So,
exactly.
I mean,
that's the whole point of the show.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
It really is also just to jump in there, is also such an honour, because I have listened to your podcast a lot. And I studied history at university, and I've always loved war films, and I never actually thought that one day I'd be making my own, let alone talking about it on a podcast. So honestly, guys, it's a real honour to be talking with you, and thank you for all the work that you do as well.
Too kind.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, so to kind of wrap up, when once you get funding and you're ready for your next stage, when are you planning on releasing the movie for everyone to enjoy?
Well, that will be obviously that all comes down to funding. But
Of course.
Of course, yeah. I mean, the plan was to try and have it cut by at least the end of this year or early 2024. And then what we plan to do is try and get it onto the festival circuit. But anyone who donates will see the film first through a private link before it is ever public. We'll hit the festival circuit with it first because that's the best way we're going to get coverage with this film and really get it out there, spread the idea of remembrance, which is what the film is about at heart. You know, we wouldn't be doing the film justice if we didn't try and get it around the world. And then after that point, it will end up digitally online. But yes, anyone who donates, they will be the first in line to get a view.
That's great.
It's also worth just mentioning that this is we are using it also as a proof of concept. So the idea is to make the short, do the rounds with the festivals. We also know that the 80th anniversary of VE Day is coming up in 2025. So hopefully we can, there's a bit of longevity with the short as it stands there. But then also to use this as a proof of concept and make something bigger about it. Because we've hopefully sort of proving that we can shoot in and around, these really unique aircraft. We've made all of these, really important connections with very important people within the community, whether that's special effects or historians or scholars or PhD candidates or the historical consultancy community as well. So we've made those connections. We feel like we've really nurtured those relationships, and that's not easily done. And that's not necessarily something you can just do by throwing money at it either. So hopefully this will be something much bigger in a couple of years as well.
No, that's great. That's fab. And I think on that note, we should end the show there. And thanks for Zoe and Martin for joining us. Zoe has actually been in hospital waiting room all the way through this, so amazing.
My finger's grown about 3 sizes since I've been talking to you.
No.
oh my god.
Well, we hope it's nothing too serious and it's not actually broken.
So that's a Fighting on Film first, and a guest coming directly from us from a hospital. Yeah, amazing. But thanks for joining us, guys. Everyone who's listening, you can find the links to the Memory Ode film. We'll be sharing them. Go follow them on Twitter as well to keep up to date with the film. And we'll be back next week with another war film for your delectation. So again, thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you, guys. Lovely to speak.
Take care.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.